Been easier to find a breaker maybe, but I don't know what else it would have turned on.
Yeah, this.
Is it
Today we're in St. Genevieve County at Chalmette Vineyards and Winery to learn about the Chambourcin grape with winemaker Henry Johnson.
Chalmette Vineyard and Winery is out in the middle of St. Genevieve County. It's about 310 acres of property with 26 acres of fruiting grapes. Growing grapes in St. Gen is sort of a tough prospect, so we grow a lot of interspecific hybrids and interspecific crosses, which are a lot more fitted for the environment. The fruiting grapes we work with are Chambourcin, Norton, Chardonnay, Vignole, and Traminette, and those are what we consider kind of the 5 main varietals in Missouri.
Missouri wine has a historical reputation in terms of creating the basis for American wine. In Missouri and in the rest of the middle part of America, we're reliant upon hybrid grapes. You end up with a grapevine that's a lot sturdier in terms of dealing with the harsh winters that we get here, in terms of dealing with the super humid summers that we have here. A lot of those grapevines are relatively new to the world. So we're still in the process of learning how to make good wine out of those. In some cases, in the case of like a Vidal Blanc or a Chambourcin, we're really good at it already.
Chambourcin tastes a lot like some sort of Mediterranean grapes where you get this kind of spicy, earthy, bramble fruit, but it can be so different based on how the style of winemaking leads it. We tend to lean towards drier wines at Chalmette. We do, of course, make semi-dries all the way out to sweet, but we do tend to sell a lot of our Chardonnay and our dry Chambourcin.
Chambourcin's versatility, I think, is part of why it's worked out so well. Chalmette does both dry and rosé styles, and in either case, you get this overt fruitiness. It is not a dry wine that sort of recedes into itself and you end up with texture but not a great deal of flavor. Chambourcin is always, to me, reliably, overtly fruity and fun and friendly. It's a pretty reliable grape for a lot of different foods.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this, our first of 3 virtual Vine wine tastings. I'm Kat Neville. I'm the publisher of Feast Magazine. And if you've covered or followed my work over the years, you know that I have a soft spot for Missouri wines. And I'm very, very excited that we're able to spotlight the Chambourcin grape. As you just heard from Doug Frost, it is fun and friendly and fruity, and we're going to taste through 4 Chambourcins from 4 of the best wineries in the state of Missouri tonight. And first, before we get started, I want to thank all of our sponsors. And the sponsors, of course, our presenting sponsor for the event is Missouri Wine. And as I mentioned, November is Chambourcin month, so I want to say thank you to Missouri Wine. We've had a long relationship, and they, in fact, sponsored Feast TV for all the seasons that we were on the air. So we have a great relationship with them, and I want to say thank you. We also have a VIP wine sponsor for all of our VIP ticket holders out there. You got yourselves a bottle of this Martin Brothers mead, which is made in the Herman area. And mead, of course, is fermented honey wine. It is an ancient beverage, and I hope that you enjoy it in your Edgecliff wine glass that also came along. Thank you to them for sponsoring as well. They actually really do specialize in Chambourcin. So, ooh, that's delicious. We're gonna start the event off with a little taste of that really beautifully balanced tart and sweet mead from Martin Brothers. I want to also thank Casa Alfonso. They are the new restaurant that's coming to the Ritz-Carlton, and so we have a $20 voucher for our VIP folks. We also have the Wood Shack in Soulard. They sent a BOGO deal. I have this sandwich that I'm going to dive into after the event wraps. We also have the beef jerky folks who sent along some fabulous beef jerky that everybody's gonna be able to nibble along with while we do the tasting, and Old Judge Coffee. Tomorrow morning, when you need your little pick-me-up, you can have some of this wonderful coffee. We also, as I mentioned, have Edgecliff Winery. Noble Ice sent along this gorgeous bottle opener, which I will be using to open our wines this evening. Cool Cow Cheese sent along some cheeses because wine and cheese obviously is a perfect pair, and I actually covered them in Feast TV, and they have a B&B on site, which is really cool. And last but certainly not least, we have some fabulous chocolate-covered nuts from IB Nuts and Fruit for you to enjoy while we taste through all these wines together tonight. And this format is a little bit different from the beer tastings, if you joined us for those, in that we're going to go through tastings with 4 of the different wineries, and then we're actually going to open it up for a Q&A. And there is an interactive screen down below where you can just type in your questions, and then magically they're going to appear on the screen that I'm looking at right now. And so when we come back and chit chat with our panelists, we're going to go ahead and field those questions. So don't be shy. Ask whatever it is that you would like. So welcome to all of our panelists. We're going to be speaking with folks from Stonehill, Adam Kukta, Noble Ice, and of course from Montel Winery. And we're going to start off with Sean from Stonehill Winery. And we have a bottle of their 2016 Chambourcin. And this, I'm going to go ahead and open. How's it going, Sean? I see that you're right there in the historic wine cellars in Herman.
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us on tonight. I've already opened mine. I couldn't wait anymore. It's after 5 o'clock, so we got to get at it.
Absolutely. So speaking of the historic cellars, there, obviously Stonehill was one of the first wineries to kind of come back after Prohibition. And if you've never had a chance to tour those cellars, right now they're closed because of obvious reasons, but once things back open up, you need to make sure that you head out to Herman and check that out. So let's taste through this wine, Sean. Tell me about the way that you made this particular Chambourcin, because it has a really beautiful fruit-forward nose to it.
Yeah, so our production process, or winemaking process, is pretty standard. I think we put a lot of focus in vineyards. That's where it all starts. It's an old cliche, but wine is really made in a vineyard. We've got about 9.5 acres of Chambourcin that we grow here on the property. 2016 was kind of an interesting harvest from what I remember. I remember July was like super hot and super wet as well. We were way ahead with growing degree days. Chambourcin is obviously a kind of a mid-late ripening variety. And about 2 weeks to a week before we actually harvested the Chambourcin, we got like drenched with almost 9 inches of rain.
Wow.
It's always interesting, around these parts. That's our biggest challenge, really. But it's just pick it at optimum ripeness if we can, and just bring it into the cellars and ferment it on the skins. And we try to get as much bang for our buck out of the grapes. So we focus a lot on the extraction of the wine from the grapes, and just make the biggest. We try to make the biggest fruit bomb we can, and it's very drinkable. That's our bottom line. It has to be drinkable and well balanced.
Absolutely. So, I think that you mentioned something that a lot of folks probably know, but don't really think about, which is that wine really starts in the vineyard. If you are an estate winery, and estate winery means that the grapes are grown, harvested, pressed, everything right there on the winery, you have to be a farmer first. And, you're dealing with Mother Nature. And obviously with Missouri, we have like massive extremes in temperature in the spring. And as you mentioned, you might have deluge of rain, you might have an early frost. How do you, as a winemaker, how do you and the folks who are managing the vineyards, how do you kind of communicate with each other to make sure that you're picking the grapes at exactly the right time?
You kind of just got to go with the flow, we're kind of prepared before the time already, and we expect these events to happen. So we look closely at the weather and everything. So luckily we can machine harvest, pretty much all our grapes. So that's a huge benefit for us. If we see we're getting a big weather event or something, we'll plan that we get after the grapes as soon as possible and just get it off the vine so it can come into the winery, and we can start being creative. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the industry here is we have to be really creative with what we work with. Like you said, it's so up and down with the weather. You never know what to expect. So really, I mean, you kind of got to throw all your tools out of the box and just kind of, you know, think a little bit different and do a lot of things, you know. So it really makes it interesting. And
Yeah.
you know, it's always, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, this is a single varietal wine. It is Chambourcin, but you're also in the process of working on your blends right now. And so I'm curious, you know, I think that if you're doing a blend, what is the process that you go through for that? Do you kind of like take wines from different barrels and mix them together? I mean, like what's the magic behind coming up with a great blend?
So it's just like I mentioned earlier on, you know, what I look for in wines is balance. So you look at chemistry obviously first, and really where the key lies is in the palate and just tasting through all of it. So you know, this is about a 900 case wine. You know, so obviously we're not going to taste through each barrel, but we've got different lots of barrels. And what I like to explain barrels as is like a little spice rack. You know, so you start knowing your barrels the more you work with them from year to year, and you know how they're going to react. And obviously you're looking at the vintage as well. For example, a cooler vintage is going to maybe have a little bit more vegetative character to it. So a good way to get around that is maybe using a little bit more oak to kind of, you know, just mask that vegetativeness. So you're just going to be looking at vintages and what you have to work with. Obviously, different vineyards, different lots have different characteristics, aroma, you know, flavor, everything like that. So it's just the end of the day, you're looking for something that's very balanced, very palatable, something that's not edgy, that doesn't stand out, you know. So that's really where the fun starts. You know, some winemakers, they enjoy the harvest, for example. You know, I kind of like the finishing part of it. It's just getting, you know, the hard work is during harvest. You know, you got only 2 months basically to make the wine and 10 months to get it in the bottle. So I kind of enjoy it at 10 months after all the hard work, where you can see your hard work paid off. And then when you can start really, you know, getting the wines together and just start building and creating something at the end of the day, that's kind of what you're looking for, you know, what you enjoy at home as well. So that's a big part of it.
And the wine that everyone's drinking right now, this spent a year on both French and American oak. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Predominantly, we use 3 types. We use the American, French, and then as well Eastern European. American oak is going to give you more the aroma, vanilla, cinnamon, you know, that nice spiciness. French oak is going to give you more of the pellet structure. And Eastern European oak is kind of, it builds on the fruit of the wine, you know. So if you smell the wine right now, you might get a lot of that smoky note coming out of it, which is more barrel driven in a sense as well. But below all of that, you get this really nice fruit compote. It's almost like candied black fruit that's from it, and that's pretty much the vineyard speaking right there, you know. And if you just taste the wine, it's not a very big red wine. I mean, it's like Doug Frost explained as well. It's really a fresh, fruity, you know. It's not an easy drinking wine, but it really fills your mouth, you know. So it's definitely, it's got substance to it. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that the wise people at Missouri Wine chose November as Chambourcin month, because this is kind of an ideal red wine to have on your Thanksgiving table, because it is fruity and it's friendly and it's a little bit lighter in style. And so it's not going to overwhelm a lot of the other flavors that are on the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I actually personally like to enjoy, you know, Chambourcin with anything smoked, you know, smoked meat, smoked brisket, smoked salmon, smoked turkey. I think, you know, the wine's at least got something to stand up to that as well. You know, if it's a really flavorful dish that you're serving with, but I mean, any tomato-based dishes, it will really work well with that, because Chambourcin being a hybrid, it does have a little bit of a higher acidity to it. So it definitely helps to cut that. Even lamb dishes really goes well with that. And I mean, we don't only make Chambourcin into a dry table red. I mean, I use it basically everywhere. I use it in our Method Champenois, a sparkling wine, Brut Rosé, it's got Chambourcin in it. Dry Rosé, it's got Chambourcin in it. I mean, so it's a very versatile grape variety. I mean, it's got, especially when you make lighter styles, it just bursts with strawberry, that raspberry character. So can go with all different dishes. But the Method Champenois, the sparkling, I like to enjoy the smoked salmon again. oysters, even strawberries, chocolate dipped strawberries. Those creamy cheeses, camembert, brie. So it's a very versatile wine. You can have it with pretty much everything, but I just like to enjoy it by itself.
That's perfect. Sean, thank you. I just want to give one shout out. While I mentioned that you can't visit the cellars in person right now, you can do a virtual tour on the website for the time being. And you do have, your tasting room is open, correct?
Yeah. Tasting room is still open. Obviously, we take precautions. I mean, we try not to let too many people into the sales room right now. It's all one directional. So we really limit the amount of people, but the tasting room is still open. You can come taste our wine, enjoy wine out on the hillside. We've got a beautiful hillside that looks down into the little town here. This summer was awesome. My lab is down here. It's actually below the hill, so I just look out every day at the hillside, and I see people just sitting at the benches outside enjoying wine, which I've never really seen that much before, but I think people are really enjoy the outside these days. So
absolutely. Sean, thank you. Thank you for sharing your 2016 Chambourcin with us and kind of going through your process. I'll see you at the end of the event when we open things up for the Q&A. So cheers to you.
Cheers, yeah.
That is delicious. I have to admit, I have a few bottles of Stonehill wine in my cellar here at home. And I also have some bottles of Angie's wine. Angie is next up. Angie, of course, is from Noble Ice, which is near the town of Augusta. And so I am opening up with
Thank you for having us.
With your fabulous wine opener that you sent. I'm opening up this bottle.
Well, and I'm going to get going here too.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having us, Kat. This is really fun. And Sean that was very interesting. And it's just so great to hear, everybody, us all using the same grape, but in many similar and different ways.
Well, and that's the thing. Okay, so first of all, I want everybody to see the label. I love your label. If you've never been to Noble Ice, this tree is iconic. It's right in front of the winery, and it's just part of the entire experience of being there. But to your point, Angie, it's kind of like when you're making cheese, where you have one ingredient, but you end up with this huge range of flavors and textures and all of this. I mean, you guys all start with, especially as we mentioned, if it's a single varietal wine, you start with Chambourcin, of course, and we'll get into this as we continue talking. The same grape planted in one place is going to taste different when it's planted somewhere else, and that's obviously called terroir.
Yes.
But I think that's what's so fun about wine is that it expresses the personality of the person who's making it.
Absolutely. And also the place, like you said, the terroir, where it was grown, what's in the ground in that particular area. We're in the Augusta AVA. So obviously Stonehill is in a wonderful grape growing region as well. And we have different soil. We have, pretty much the same climate, obviously. But even it's interesting because it's even where the vineyard is placed on, the property, has bearing into, the flavor. And I love that they chose Chambourcin because it is obviously, as Sean pointed out, is such a versatile grape, and there's so much that you can do about it. It's wonderful on its own. I was going to talk a little bit about some of the other wines that we use it for, but in contrast, a lot of people know Norton. Mm-hmm. That's the other grape that we grow, and we specifically put that vineyard on our north slope so that it would have to struggle a little bit more because it's a little bit cooler and Norton needs to struggle. Chambourcin doesn't need to struggle quite as much because it actually is a huge producer. You get bigger yields with Chambourcin. And what's interesting is actually a lot of times you're going through and dropping fruit so that the remaining fruit can be as robust as possible and really leave that best fruit hanging for the harvest.
That again is kind of like that magic part of winemaking that a lot of people, again, if it's an estate winery, that a lot of people just don't see is, I think a lot of folks might think, they go and they visit a beautiful winery and they see all these like vines surrounding them and think, oh, you just kind of like wait for the fruit to be ripe, and then you pick it, and that's whatever. But I mean, it is a year-round process. And didn't you just wrap up harvest today?
Actually, we were bottling today.
Bottling today.
Bottling, yes, we bottled our reds. And in fact, we bottled our 2019 Chamberson. That was one we did our Norton and our Chamberson and a few other wines. So, you know, they just, you know, we kind of let them age a little bit longer. And most of our bottling usually occurs, you know, more in the spring to, you know, the summer. And so this was a group of reds that we had aged a little bit longer before going ahead and bottling them. And the bottling process is really fun too. But yeah, I think I'm trying to think what our last harvesting day. I mean, it's been you know, since middle of October. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, so this particular Chamberson that we're tasting, was it fermented on oak, or did it just?
Yes. So this is 100% Chamberson, obviously, as all of them are. And it was 6 months aged in a mixture of Hungarian, French, and American oak. And then once it went into the tank, it was aged even a little bit longer with oak staves. So, you know, yeah, it spent a decent amount of time in oak, and then obviously it ages, it just continues to age. And as you know, it continues to age in the bottle as well. So
it's a living thing.
It is. It really is. And so a lot of times, even after we bottle, we hold on to our reds before we release them for quite some time, because everybody knows bottle shock, you know, that of course happens, but also you just really want that wine to mature in the bottle as well. So the aging process is, you know, is not just in the barrel. It continues from the tank, and then that's why you hold on to, you know, certain bottles of wine in your cellar for years, because it's just you know, that's what's so exciting about wine is how much it changes.
And no bottle. I mean, even from, you know, year to year, you might have a Chamberson from you one year, and next year it might taste totally different because of the weather conditions, or, you know, whatever it is, the level of sugar when you harvested. There are so many different, and again, that's another thing that I love about wine, is that like every time you open up a bottle, you know, even if it's from the same winery that you love their style of winemaking, it's going to be a different experience. And that's what's fun for me, at least.
Right. And I love that that everyone is experiencing that, and that as we're having this conversation, that they're able to, you know, side by side taste these 4 Chambersons and see the differences and, you know, and the similarities as well. I know our Chamberson, just like Sean said, it's a wine that we bottle on its own, but it's also one that is wonderful for dry rosé. You know, and we that's what our dry rosé is, 100% Chamberson, and it's pressed at harvest. And we also do a brut rosé, and then we actually do quite a bit of blending with our Chamberson. We've got a couple of our reserve wines, and, you know, you get to go through and pick your favorite barrels of, you know, for us, it would be Norton and Chamberson, and on occasion, Crimson Cab, that we, you know, that's the fun part, you know, when you can really hand pick those barrels for the, you know, to make those reserve blends.
Well, speaking of, aren't you working on the 3rd installment of the small batch series right now?
We are. Yes, we are. We are very excited about our ports. It's a program that our winemakers started years ago, and as you know, port it has a long shelf life, and that's another one that just gets better with age. And we started with our ports with it's a volume series where we just have volume 1, and then volume 2 has volume 1 and volume 2. We're on volume 6 now.
Wow.
So volume 6 has some volume 1 in it. So as the volumes grow, they're just naturally aged because they're, you know, you keep folding in each barrel. But the small batch series that you're talking about was the brainchild of our winemakers, and they get so giddy. Everybody gets so excited about these projects because they are small batch. I mean, they really are. But we find great the one that we are working on next is a bourbon barrel, and, you know, you put the port in there and it ages in the bourbon barrel, and we've done rye bourbon, we've done different things. So one we did, it had maple syrup in it, and we aged a port in it. So just that small batch series is really kind of a place where we can innovate and have fun with port, and it's gone over really well. So it's been really fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap it up and then I'll check in with you at the end. But before we go, what is the experience of the winery right now? Like, these wines, are they available only at the winery? Where can people get them?
Yes, you can absolutely get them at the winery. And I think everyone's going to probably be unanimous in that we have just seen record numbers this year. I think people, I mean, I know we have a lot of outdoor space. People have been enjoying the outdoor space, particularly this year. And we still have that. In the winter, we're actually trying to figure out a way to, you know, have a good winter experience as well, possibly in our cellar. And so we are still going to, you know, we're still open. You can come out there and get anything. You can get, you know, our small batch and everything at the winery. And then select places, you know, we distribute like Total Wine and Friar Tuck's and other select areas. So
fantastic.
Yeah. Thank
Cheers
you.
to you, Angie.
Yes.
Good
Thanks,
to see
Pat.
you.
You too.
I'll see you in just a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So next up, in fact, right down the street from Angie, down the road, not the street. I've been told the different nomenclature of road verbiage. Anyway, now we're talking to Tony from Montel and also Augusta Winery. And so we're going to taste Tony's 2019 Chambourcin, if you guys can see that. And this one is from Montel. And if you've ever been to Montel Winery, it is beautiful. It's perched right atop this incredible, essentially a cliff in a way that overlooks the Augusta AVA. And we kind of touched a little bit on the Augusta AVA and the fact that it's different from the Herman AVA. And Tony, I know that this is really, you know, dear to your heart. So could you like talk about what an AVA is and what makes the Augusta AVA so special?
It's one of my favorite topics. Thank you.
How did I know that?
So what's interesting is that Augusta was designated as the first American viticultural area, AVA, American Viticultural Area, in June 20th, 1980. And we actually beat out California. We beat out Napa Valley. We beat out Sonoma. And the reason we did it is because we followed all the rules. The government, at that time it was the BATF, now it's the TTB, part of the Treasury Department. They were the ones that were in charge of doing this. And they asked the wineries to present a area that was unique from all the surrounding area and vineyards. And that's what we did. We chose a 15 square mile piece of land that was uniquely situated between the Missouri River Valley and the Osage Ridge. And the soils here are extremely unique. And the reason for that is because 10,000 years ago, the last continental glacier came through our area. It started up in Hudson Bay area and this huge glacier with ice and a lot of strength plowed all the way through the central part of the United States, and it stopped right in Augusta. And along with this ice was also all the soil, the minerals from all the areas north of us. And Augusta was the terminal moraine, meaning that that's exactly where the glacier stopped, the ice melted, and we were left with all this spectacular soil that has a lot of mineral content, is very well drained, perfect for growing grapes. And you know, the pioneers, the settlers that came into the Augusta area recognized this right away and planted vineyards and orchards. And I feel that it's my job, it's our job to express this soil in our wines. The soils in the Augusta AVA define the wines that we produce. And I think when you taste an Augusta wine, you really can pick out the flavors and the qualities and the minerality that is unique to our area.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the exciting thing about wine, is wine that's a little different and exciting.
Well, and so speaking of that, I mentioned that you have two different wineries, Montel, perched on the cliff, and then Augusta Winery, which is like right in the heart of Augusta, which is, if you guys have never been to Augusta, go. It is charming and lovely. But your wines are totally different. And you might have a Norton for Augusta and a Norton for Montel, or a Chambourcin for one and a Chambourcin for the other. And they're very different in character. Are they grown in the same places? Because you're still within the Augusta AVA. So how do you express such different character in these wines that on paper would look like they should be the same?
Well, all our vineyards are in the Augusta AVA. So we're an estate winery, like you mentioned before. The grapes are grown on our property or on property that's in the Augusta AVA that we control the way the grapes are grown and how they're harvested and all aspects of the viticulture. What I try to do is I try to present different styles between the different varieties. So with the Montel Chambourcin, this is a 2019. I produce it in a New World style, meaning that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to express the fruit here. So I'm trying to get some nice fresh fruit early to the market. It's a wine that you don't have to age. As soon as you buy it, it's ready to drink, and you can get a lot of very fresh, jammy fruit flavors. You know, what I pick out in the Montel wine is blackberry jam, a little bit of raspberry compo. I pick up some black plums, black cherries, a little bit of licorice. You can smell the licorice in there, or road beer. And so this is an interesting take on Chambourcin. It's only in the barrels for 6 to 8 months, whereas at Augusta, our Chambourcin is aged in barrels for 18 to 20 months. And so therefore you get a more, I guess you might say, sophisticated, you get a little bit more, barrel notions. So you get more of the spice, more of the oakiness.
And more of the rounding off of the edges, in the same way that, like, when you take a white whiskey, a moonshine, you put it in the barrel and let it sit, that barrel lends its character. Are your barrels charred when you, like, how is that aspect, how do you kind of guide that aspect of the aging?
That's an important part of the red wine aging process, and we're real particular about our barrels. All the barrels we use for Chambourcin are Missouri oak. They're made in Lebanon, Missouri by World Cooperage. We've worked with them for 40 years, and we specify that the staves that the barrels are made from have to be aged for 36 months outside in the rain and the sunshine and the wind, which kind of reduces the astringent tannins in the oak. And then we specify exactly how they're going to be toasted. So I like to call it toasted rather than charred, because when you look inside, it should be a nice, anywhere from a very light, toasty brown color to a somewhat darker color. And it's the amount of heat for the length of time that really develops the flavors in the wine. And we specify, they're able to do this at World Cooperage. We can specify exactly the temperature and the length of time that we want the barrels toasted.
Oh, it's fascinating. I mean, Tony, we've known each other for a while. I could like chit chat with you forever, but I'm going to have to check in with you when we come back to the Q&A. One thing, as far as the winery, the Parliament Room is open to folks once kind of the weather starts to get a little bit icky. Is that kind of like what is the experience people can have at Montel?
Yeah, so up till now, we were primarily outside. So, and we have a huge area. We have seating capacity for 700 people, and everybody's separated, by 6 or 8 feet, and you're in the fresh air, so everything is pretty nice. Our tasting room is huge. You've been there. It's one of the biggest tasting rooms in the state. So we have plenty of room to separate our customers when they come in for a tasting. And the Parliament room is huge also. That's our indoor seating area. We use it for events. We use it for wintertime seating. People can come in and grab a table by the fireplace. We always have a fire going in the winter, and order food. That's one of the unique things about Montel. We have our own restaurant deli, so there's always fresh food to enjoy with the wine. Sit down, have a good time, and not have to worry about health concerns.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tony. Cheers to you. And we will chat. And I know that I just saw, and I'll pose this when it comes back. I just saw a question came in about which wines at each one of your wineries are your favorite. So think about that, because picking your favorite, I'm sure, is not easy. And we'll jump in on that in the Q&A at the end. And so now I'm going to chit chat with Tim Pukta, who is like, you're surrounded by all of your wine in your tasting room. I love that. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kat. Thanks for having us. Absolutely.
We're thrilled to have you. And for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with the history of Missouri wine, Adam Pukta Winery is located in the Hermann AVA, which is a separate AVA from Augusta. And Tim, you're celebrating your 165th anniversary. And I'm reading this because I don't want to screw it up. The oldest single family run winery in the country. Every time I've said that, sometimes I flip the words around, but that is tremendous. And when you come to the winery, the sense of history is very palpable. And I've had the opportunity to go to like your family house where, your ancestors built like this teeny tiny little, stone cabin where they lived with like 8 people in one room, and just the history that's there is incredible. Can you kind of give people just a little overview?
Yeah, this year we're 165 years old as the oldest continuously owned family farm winery in the United States. My family immigrated from Oberkatzau, Germany, which is now part of, or Bavaria, which is now part of Germany. And we came over in this area, and we were Bavarian winemakers and butchers. And we immediately started clearing land and started putting in vineyards. And my great-great-grandfather Adam went out to the gold rush, drove a herd of cattle, sold the cattle to the miners, panned for enough gold in California and Nicaragua to come back to start the winery in 1855. And we have been, other than the failed experiment called Prohibition, we've been producing wine for the family and for their customers for many, 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 many years.
Absolutely.
And this year we're just very grateful that we have the opportunity as a family to be continuing on what we do, and at 165 years.
It's incredible. And so the wines that you're making now, and you're working with your son, so it's the family tradition truly does continue. This particular Chambourcin that everyone is tasting is called Situation Red, and it's inspired by the musical notes of the songs of yesteryear. So explain to me which songs and which notes.
Well, the history on Chambourcin, it's not, I'm gonna kind of downplay this a little bit, but years ago it was not one of my favorite grapes. I thought it was very herbaceous and had some issues that I wasn't real thrilled about. But it took a few years of learning to play with those, and a lot of those vintages came from working with different yeasts, working with different fermentation temperatures, and those allowed us just come up with a style using particular yeast, particular temperature ranges to allow the Chambourcin grape to express its fruit rather than the herbaceous characteristics that I think it has a lot of times. And so that's, once we started down that path, then our Chambourcins became very, very blendable. We use them in a lot of different blends. We use them in our dry rosé. We use them in, and then the Situation Red came about. We wanted to do a dry Chambourcin, but we were kind of playing around with, at the time when we released ours, Chambourcin was not that well liked. So we decided to put a proprietary name on it. And I've been playing musical instruments and in bands since I was 9 years old. And so we came up with this little story, and it basically revolved around my musical background, and hence the Situation Red and a couple of different, it goes back to a few songs from the 80s that we really enjoyed. So it's kind of a quirky but fun wine to work with.
It's really fun, and it's young and it's bright, and it has like this kind of just jammy berry quality to it. I mean, it seems like it is perfectly suited to something like, I mean, Missouri barbecue would be kind of the perfect thing to eat alongside this bottle of wine.
Well, yeah, the wine doesn't have a lot of tannin structure. It's very soft. It's very delicate. It has some oak in it. We're probably one of the few that don't use barrels. We actually use toasted French and American oak staves that we put into stainless steel tanks, and we're able to actually control the spice level and the amount of oak that we want to pull out of there. And it's a little more subdued, but it makes for a really nice, well-rounded, very, very rich tasting wine. And there's no real dead spots with this particular wine. You get this nice fruit, pomegranate and black cherry, and just these just wonderful jammy, like you were saying, jammy characteristics that make it just a nice, easy drinking Chambourcin.
Absolutely. And we're going to have to kind of like go to our Q&A here in just a little bit, but this is, I mean, 165 years of history, but you're still growing and changing. You're actually in the process of prepping grounds for an entirely new vineyard where you're going to be planting Vidal Blanc. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, we're finding that we have the property to be able to put some more vineyards on the property, and this is kind of the brainchild of my son Parker, who you know very well, and so he's working on putting some new vineyard sites in below the other vineyard and to the right of one of our Norton and Vignoles sites, and some of that is just to bolster up our control over the quality of the wines that we have, and to put in some shortfalls or put in some stopgaps in case, this year there was some shortfalls in grapes due to frost damage and things from some of the vineyards we get our grapes from. We don't grow a lot of our own grapes, so we're dependent on a lot of other growers, and by doing that, there are years where you get shortfalls. And so this year we once again, it happens every once in a while, we realize some of those shortfalls, so we're decided to try to start the process to correct some of those issues. So yeah, it's exciting. We've got a lot of things going on here. I'm kind of getting back in the winemaking phase right now because our current winemaker that we had retired after 16 years here.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm kind of been brought out of the background to start watching the wines again. So we'll see how that goes.
I think it's going to go beautifully. Thank you so much, Tim. And here's to you. Now, I think we're going to open everything up to all of our fabulous wine makers, wine folks to do the Q&A. And we do have a bunch of questions. So forgive me while I lean into my computer and take a look. So the first one that I did see come through is, do you need to chill wine? And also, if you don't have time to, do these wines need to breathe, number one? And which wines do or don't? And should they be chilled or not? Who wants to take that one?
I'd be happy to take it.
We flip a coin.
So, go ahead, Sean.
I think it's very subjective if a wine needs to be chilled or not. I think more full-bodied red wines like what we've been tasting tonight, probably room temperature is better rather than chilled. These wines do have a little bit of structure to them, a little bit of tannin. Normally chilling would just enhance that, the astringency a little bit. So I would definitely serve at room temperature. As far as breathing goes, again, subjective. I think a lot of screw cap wines these days, probably New World wines as well, they're made a little bit more reductive. So letting a red wine with a screw cap breathe might be beneficial. It might, just open the bottle up a little bit more, get more of the fruitiness out. But if you're talking about old world wines with, those crusty corks in it, they can even, benefit from a little bit of breathing, just kind of dust up the cobwebs, if you want to call it, but definitely it's very varietal as well. So Tony, if you want to add to that, you're welcome.
Well, I like to decant just because it's fun to do, it's not really necessary. If you pour the wine in your glass and swirl it around a little bit and let it breathe, and then you get it volatilizes the esters in the wine, molecules in the wine, and you can smell the wonderful aromas that come off of this grape. So not necessary, but a lot of fun.
I think it would be fun for the viewers to actually try it both ways. That would be a really interesting experiment, because I agree with Tony. There's something very, seductive about pouring a bottle of wine into a beautiful decanter and letting it breathe. And I really do believe that it does open up the wine. But it would also be interesting to, try it both ways and see, because as Sean pointed out, it is really sometimes personal preference too. There's not a wrong way to drink wine.
There is no wrong way. Okay. We have about 12 minutes. So I want to make sure that we get to some more of these questions. Paul says, I was surprised that winemakers reuse barrels. How many times can you use the same barrel?
At our winery, we use the barrels for 6 years. So what we try to do in a particular blend is we try to have an equal amount of barrels that are brand new, have been used once already, and have been used twice. And that way, each age of the barrel produces different qualities in the wine.
So speaking of barrels, one of our viewers, Sean, was curious, could you talk about the difference between Missouri oak and French oak? You mentioned that you use both. And so what are the different flavors that they impart to wines?
So the big difference is actually the growing season, growing region and everything. Obviously the US climate will produce different types of oak. We're also talking about two different species, Quercus alba in America and Quercus petraea out in France and Eastern Europe. It all depends on the density as well. Sorry, I'm getting too technical, but the big thing is, as you talked about earlier, you were talking about charring, and we call it toasting as well. In barrels, you get different levels of toasting. Actually, you get light, medium, and heavy. And what the toasting process actually do is they change the chemical compounds in the barrel to release more volatile compounds into the wine. So I mentioned that the American oak is more aromatic. They got more volatile compounds in there that will give you more of that vanillin, really like the coffee latte kind of notes to it, cinnamon, like spicy notes as well, a dark chocolate too, where the French oak barrels, they've got different compounds in there, which is not so aromatic. They're more structural, so their tannins more in the wine and actually will build on the palate. That gives you more structure to the wine, more mouthfeel. it's also a very important thing is the cooper itself. How they season their staves and once they get it from the auction, from the tree yard, in the weather where they at. For example, we actually use French oak that seasoned in France by the same coopers, also seasoned in the US, and it's basically the same wood, but there's totally different nuances to them. So it's almost like grapes, like wine. It's terroir as well. When we talk about barrels, really we're talking about terroir too. So there's all these little different things, and that's kind of what makes wine cool. It's just all these different things that, like I said, the spice rack.
Well, and like each decision adds up to the wine, and they all are kind of like ingredients in the recipe. All of these different things, and until I would assume that until you pull those grapes in, and like when do you start? This is my own question. When do you start to understand the character of the grapes that you have harvested and what you want to do with them? Do you understand after it's just been juiced and it's fresh out of the vineyard, or do you let it rest and ferment? Like, when do you know what you want to do with a certain harvest?
I think the quality pretty right away. I don't know that the entire story yet at harvest, but I think that if it's a good beginning of the story or not. You can definitely have higher yields, lower yields. Low yield isn't bad. I mean, some of the low yield harvests that we've had have produced some of the highest quality grapes, actually. So I think that right when it comes in and goes in the hopper, and but then the story unfolds from there, because there's much more to reveal as the winemaking process continues.
I love that. So, okay, there are, I already mentioned that one of our viewers wants to know Tony's favorite wines. So quickly, we only have about 7 or 8 minutes left. Tony, what are your favorite wines at both of the wineries? And just really quickly, Casey asked, is Chambourcin always red? Chambourcin is a red grape, but it can be made rosé, or it could be made obviously in its traditional red style. So, Tony, if you want to handle that one.
Well, the cliche is the wines are like my children, and I can't pick one out and say it's better than the other. But the question from one of the viewers was, what are my favorite wines from the various wineries? And at Augusta Winery, I really like the Chambourcin there for the red wine. And I really like the Chardonnay for a white wine. At Montel, I'm in love with the Reserve Norton. It's aged for 2.5 years in oak barrels. And the Seyval Blanc is one of my favorites. Nice, crisp, fruity wine.
And you're really kind of hitting on a lot of those hybrid varieties varietals that do really well in the Missouri climate. And speaking of the grapes that grow well here, Rick is asking, how long after planting the vines are you able to produce wine? It's not immediate. I mean, you have to wait a bit. So kind of explain, how long does it take to establish a vineyard?
Well, it takes about 4 years. After you plant the grapevine, you have to wait 4 years before you can actually start harvesting grapes. And, it's interesting about the types of grapes that we grow here. We've picked grape varieties that do well in our climate. If we tried to bring in grape varieties that do well in California or in Western Europe, they don't do as well. They don't taste as good. You have to find the grapevines that enjoy the climate that you're in.
I think that's good advice for life in general, Tony. So another question that we have here from Emma. She would like to know, what makes a grape good for blending? I mean, are all grapes suitable to be blended? Does it matter? Just depending on do you take and let me kind of extrapolate on her question. not only are certain varietals ripe for blending, but how do you decide this harvest of Chambourcin or this harvest of Vidal Blanc or whatever is going to be a blend, and we're going to focus on a certain other variety? I think that that's part of the decision making that has to go on during harvest. Isn't that right?
Yes. Go ahead.
No, Angie, go for it.
Well, I was just gonna I think kind of marrying a couple of questions there. So I would say Chambourcin is a great blending wine or blending grape just because it is a little more medium body, and Norton is a little more established in the flavor profile, and so it is a great blending wine, but Chambourcin tends to go with, I would say, more things. And I would say on the white side, for us anyway, we kind of look to Vidal Blanc for that. There's a vineyard that we pull from in Augusta that's Vidal Blanc, and Vidal it really blends well because it's like a chameleon. It can kind of go with a lot of different varieties, versus a Traminette would be very floral, very fruitful. It would maybe be. It's also a good blending wine, but you're going to really pick up those maybe stronger flavors, and so it may overpower. Maybe that's a good way to answer that question. And as far as Chambourcin, it is always red. I'm going back to a question from before. It is always a red wine, but I know one of our wines, we actually blend it with 2 whites, and we call that our gateway to the reds. And so somebody that might be moving from a white to a red would enjoy that wine, our Steepleview, because it is 30% white and 70% Chambourcin. So it can actually be blended with whites too.
Interesting. So technically, would that be called a rosé?
It's not. It's a blend. Because the rosé is pressed at harvest, so it's 100% Chambourcin. It's a little bit different process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
So we have another question. We only have a few minutes left. Heather was wondering, can Missouri winemakers do projects together where they blend their juice from different wineries? And obviously, a lot of Missouri wineries source grapes from other vineyards, many of which don't have a brand name or any kind of an identity. But would there ever be kind of in the way that maybe a distillery and a brewery would kind of partner on something? Is there a way that maybe Missouri wineries would partner up?
Oh, sure. I think that's always a possibility. I mean, we're looking at working with a brewery ourselves to put in one of our wines along with in a barrel and doing some different things. So I think there's always that aspect of working with other aspects of wine production. To put wineries together to do a project, that might be a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever been done before that I'm aware of.
Well, maybe Heather has a good idea. Maybe we should do some sort of Missouri wine collaboration series. I think that, having been an observer and connected to the Missouri wine industry for as long as I have, I think that would be really, really interesting.
It could be it definitely would be informative.
Definitely. So, I think, are there any other questions, Bob? Bob, you cannot see. He is the man who is running the actual event, and I have to also give a shout out to Courtney, who is our event coordinator. Sorry, I got distracted by one of the questions, and the answer is yes. You want to serve your mead chilled, and I still have some of my mead in my Edgecliff glass. And just Bob is also asking, does anyone smash the grapes with their feet? And the answer is no, Bob, they do not. But I think they might ceremonially do that in Herman every once in a while, like maybe during Oktoberfest. Sean, is that right? Just for fun?
Yeah, they did do it a few years ago. Kind of a dangerous process, but I did trial it on the cellar, and anecdotal thing, and the result was awful. Yeah. But, thank
Just
goodness
think
for
of
water.
all the yeast and bacteria that would be included. You know, talk about wild yeast in beer making when you talk about stamping or stomping wine with your feet. There's a lot of wild yeast involved. Unless I'm
Pretty much.
talking about.
No, that's probably not good.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it is 8:01 and I know that we are at time. I cannot thank all of you enough. Tim, Sean, Angie, Tony, thank you for being part of this, our first virtual wine tasting. It's been such a pleasure for me. I love the work that you do. I have such deep respect for the work that you do. And I have to thank our sponsors, if you'll indulge me. Our presenting sponsor, Missouri Wines. Our VIP sponsor, Martin Brothers Winery, the makers of the mead. The VIP food sponsor, Casa Don Alfonso. They are going to be opening up in the Ritz in St. Louis in December. Also, VIP food sponsor Wood Shack in Soulard, the makers of those incredible sandwiches. Then we also have the VIP snack sponsor, the Beef Jerky Outlet, the VIP coffee sponsor, our friends at Old Judge Coffee, the VIP wine glass sponsor, our friends at Edgecliff, and also the bottle opener sponsor, which is, of course, Noble Ice, our cheese sponsor at Cool Cow Creamery, and our nut sponsor at IB Nuts and Fruit 2. And again, I just want to thank all of you for joining us for this event. They're so much fun. I know that we aren't in person and most events are, but you know, being able to connect this way virtually, it's almost as fun. And I look forward to seeing you in January as we taste through Norton's, which is, of course, the Missouri State Grape. So I raise my glass to you, and I'll see you soon. Happy holidays and stay safe and healthy. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.